Here we grow. Welcome to Marriage with Joy, which is the most open discussion on the internet about the positive, purposeful, powerful, pleasant aspects of living in harmony with matrimony. Marriage with Joy unabashedly discusses the most interesting questions raised by listeners. Our informed and informative panel addresses issues with thought, wit, and aplomb. Voted best of the web 2 years running. Good day, beautiful, bountiful, beloved, immortal beings, and good-looking people. Remember, you're good-looking, so always looking for and finding the good. We found good in abundance with our remarkably gifted, wonderful, beautiful, bountiful, beloved panelists, hosts, co-hosts, just remarkable beings. We have, of course, Dr. Diane Medved in the far northwest regions of the United States of America, on an island. She lives on an island with her husband and surrounded by grandchildren and friends and family and such. It's called Mercer Island. And actually, we'll call it Mercy Island because that's what they bring to it. I just made it up. And, of course, down in the way southeast, on the Gulf side, right, Maura?
Right.
Gulf side of Florida is our delightful, wonderful Maura Sweeney, the ambassador of happiness. And may be joining us, hopefully she will, in the southwest, you're in the southwest corner of the United States in Manhattan Beach, wonderful Lori McDermott, the wife expert. She texted in and said that she has an unusual situation, a rash and such, and she's at the doctor. Hopefully she'll get back in time at some point and tune in on the computer. And holding down the fort in the desert and the Alamo in Henderson, Nevada, yours truly, the ambassador of joy, your humble host, Barry Shore. So we're going to have today one of the more interesting shows that we've ever done. Actually, I don't even I'm going to retract that phrase, please. I feel like we're in a courtroom. Retract that, strike that. Because every show we do is really fascinating and interesting. And we get people telling us that. So I'm just going to bring up that this one will be more topical, and because of something that it's in the news when it's first happened, and now almost a month later, and it has to do with a speech, a commencement address, not a speech, a commencement address that was given by a football player who was one of the reasons that the Kansas City Chiefs won their second straight Super Bowl. He was a hero, of course, because he helped win the Super Bowl for the Kansas City Chiefs. And now he's in the center of a controversy, a national controversy, which if nothing else, is getting people speaking about stuff. In other words, in my humble opinion, some of the crazies that are coming out against it, and then we'll talk about what he said, are no need. It's a chattering class. They're clutching at their pearls for no reason. But I will say, I mentioned to Diane, just before we went on, that something happened to me today that was truly wonderful. And I want to share it because it's our podcast. It's called Marriage with Joy. So I'm going to say a story. I'll make it extremely brief that Diane knows because it's a very famous story in the Jewish world about a particular married man and his wife, married for that, I think at the time, let's say they're married 30 years or so. And they went to the doctor, and the husband, who's well known as a very righteous being, the doctor asked what's going on, and the man answered, "Our tooth hurts." He didn't say, "My wife's tooth hurts." He said, "Our tooth hurts." Why? And he wasn't being funny. He was expressing that complete oneness with his wife over the pain she was feeling. It was her tooth, but he felt the pain. So I tell that story, Diane, you know the story, right? So it's almost apocryphal, except for the fact that it happened. So today, I'm actually choking now talking about it. Today, My wife and I married 47 years. Last night, she had this awful toothache. She couldn't sleep. So in the morning, I woke her up. She likes to go shopping on Wednesday mornings. So I get her up at 8, and she's like, I can't go. It's hurt. It's terrible. It's all swollen and such. What do we do? So I called our dentist, and I got the receptionist, and the person said, well, I'm sorry, the doctor is booked right now, and the doctor's going away tomorrow, and she can't see you. And I said, we're patients of yours. All I ask is that tell the doctor and ask the doctor if she can see my wife for 5 or 10 minutes just to assess what's going on. She doesn't have to work on it. That way she'll feel better that somebody looked at it. And if she says it's X, Y, and Z, then we'll take care of it. But I asked as a favor because he's around the corner from us. No, couldn't happen. Didn't call us back. So, of course, what did I do? I called a friend of mine who said, well, gee, Mr. Shore, go on the internet and find something called emergency dentists. Which I did. And I found several of them around. And this one happened to be 35 minutes away, which is very unusual because we live in a place where there's lots of dentists. We found one, an emergency dentist, book an appointment, and we start driving and we get there. And very nice, clean office. And there were one couple ahead of us and such. And of course, since it's an emergency type of place, you're expecting to wait, not like an emergency room in a hospital. So I'm going to make the story a bit shorter now. Suffice to say, it was about 40-minute wait. And we're in the room and I'm talking to my wife and she's talking to me, which is very nice in and of itself. And she had mentioned something to me, which I found very fun. And I'm not going to repeat that. However, when the doctor did come in, so we asked, he did the x-ray and found out what it is. She has to have 2 teeth pulled. And the good news is that it wasn't, what they call it, surgically removed. It was regular extraction. Okay, which is nice. It hurt less and it cost less. So it still costs many hundreds of dollars, but it's much better. And we just came back, literally 4 minutes before the show started. So it took us from 11 this morning until that time. And I got to do what this famous story, that's how I felt when we went into the dentist office. Our tooth hurt. That's exactly what Diane, that's what I said to the lady at the desk. I wasn't trying to be funny. I was trying to really feel that. And again, the whole process of hours and hours that I could have been working, could have gone swimming. But I'm not going to just drop her off at the dentist office and pick her up later. To be able to do that, I'm married 47 years, and I finally got to do something just for my wife. Just for her. Nothing for me. I'm telling you, I felt special. It was, okay. That's what I wanted. I'm sharing with both of you because we do this stuff together, right? I mean, this is what it's all about, isn't it? This is marriage with joy. So I'm in an appreciation heaven at the moment. Okay, so we're going to segue now into this interesting topic, or at least people are finding it interesting, and I'll do the setup. So I think most people who are literate or just know what's going on know that it was a fellow, his name is Harrison Butker. He's a kicker for the Kansas City Chiefs and a Catholic, a devoted Catholic, actually, not just raised Catholic, as he said. He's an observant Catholic. And he was asked to give the commencement speech at a small Catholic college called Benedictine College in Atkinson, Kansas, yes, which is not far from Kansas City. So you're talking about a small college, small Catholic college, one person speaking, and he spoke about faith. And by the way, everything I'm saying, this is my opinion. I mean, I've read many things. I've read the speech, the commencement address, and I've read many things around it from the far left and to, I guess, far right. And I'm not looking for consensus from each of us. I'm just giving my opinions at the moment. And I found it, I'll tell you the 3 things that stood out because it's what everybody's talking about and what I read. And one of them is that he he pointedly made a statement that, in his opinion, obviously, Pride Month is a great sin because obviously, and that was those were his words. Pride Month is great. Now he was making a joke, or not a joke, an allusion to the idea that pride is a great sin. But he was talking about Pride Month because he's opposed to homosexuality. He's also opposed to DIE, which I call DIE. He calls everybody else called DEI. And he also was, how should we say it? He's not a fan in any way of the LGBT, et cetera, group. The thing that I believe got most people most upset was that he claims and believes that for his wife, being a homemaker is a very high level of accomplishment. And apparently people found that to be challenging. Okay. So again, this is my opinion. You don't have to agree with me. I'm telling you what I saw. Now, I will go and make the comment that personally, Barry Shore agrees with most of what he said. That's Barry Shore. Nothing to do with the show. Each of us is going to have our own opinion. And so to lead off, as we always do, the amazing woman with almost pearls to clutch, Dr. If you want to clutch at your pearls.
Chattering class. I think I'll just chatter.
Is our wonderful Dr. Diane Medved. So wonderful, Di, would you be kind enough to speak about your insights, impressions, comments about either what Harrison said or what you think could have been misinterpreted or understood?
Yes, you may regret that question.
Okay.
I did listen to the entire speech. I saw it on a video, the entire 20 minutes, beginning to end. I saw him deliver it on the video. I never heard him say anything against LGBTQ in any way. He said we should all be proud, and then he just made an aside comment. He said, yeah, and they give a whole month to it. Ha, ha, ha. That was as close as he came to mentioning gay people. So he did not trash them at all. I think
I do want to put you on pause just for a moment. You do know that in the stuff that's written about it, that's what is said.
No, because I never read anything about it.
Okay, I read.
Watch it. I watched it.
Okay, but I'm just telling you, I went on to NPR website and I read over 600 comments, and I'm telling you, as if
the comments are not based on the actual speech.
That's what I was going to mention. As if they never read it.
And what happens is there's a small little voice, and then it gets amplified outwards so it becomes something it's not. The game of the phone is now the game of internet, and it's wrong. He didn't say that. Now, he did say about his wife, and he was praising her, that she had intended to have a career and that she ended up with the career instead being a homemaker. And what a wonderful thing it was, and how she wouldn't give it up, and how happy she was. And anybody who could object to someone choosing a career for themselves and being happy is a bigot. I mean, I don't think you should look at other people's choices that is making them happy and fulfilling for them and criticize them unless it's harming someone. So if you think it's harming someone for Mrs. Butker to be a homemaker, then I think your values are screwed up. Sorry.
Wait a minute. This was great. This is the first time I've heard Dr. Diane Medved use, for want of a better term, street language.
That was street language about 2 generations ago.
Right. Okay. But I mean, talk about mild, but I'm just saying it.
Okay. Yeah. Okay, so I think that it was perfectly fine, especially in a Benedictine college. What he was more focused on, that people apparently, according to you, from what I know, which is 0, didn't pick up on, was that he was mainly talking about God and what Catholics need to do and how Catholics need to follow the Catholic doctrine. He was talking about the Latin service, and he had a much larger part of his talk was about the fulfillment of attending services as they were originally written in Latin, and that he urged everyone who is listening to find services in Latin. And he gave criteria for choosing a church. And he talked about the sense of community and the kind of people but the most important is the kind of service it is. And he was talking about why that was so important. He's clearly very devout and sincere. And for anyone to get up in arms about that would be ridiculous. Now, I'm going to change into something that you may find controversial, which was while I was listening, I was surprised to hear him, especially, okay, I'll admit, I'm sensitized against anti-Semitism. I'm a Jewish person, and there's way too much anti-Semitism being displayed in our country and around the world right now. And I'm adamantly opposed to any expression of anti-Semitism. I do believe anti-Zionism is anti-Semitism. And I think that the way the Jewish state is being covered in this war that they did not provoke is unlike any in history. Bless you. Bless you. What a great entry.
I was going to say, if you're going to have to come and say hello and in the middle of a show, what better way? And by the way, we will say to Lori to as a segue to what you just said, Diane, God bless you. Okay.
God bless you. Okay, so in that, I'm going to say something of the controversial part. So you're like you're here, or maybe you'll wish you weren't. What he said at one point was, we have to be able to say what we really believe, and in our culture, there is repression against those who want to say what they believe. And as an example of something that he felt that people should be allowed to say, but isn't politically correct to say, is who really killed Jesus. Now, his saying that it's okay to discuss it, not just discuss, to assert who really killed Jesus, to me, smacked of anti-Semitism, because the blood libel and anything, I mean, there have been crusades where hundreds of thousands of people were killed because of their belief that Jewish people killed Jesus. And I think that, censoring what people say should be limited. But on the other hand, when it is clearly meant against an entire group, I think that needs to be examined. It doesn't necessarily need to be eliminated, but I think it should be examined. And what Harrison Butker said smacked to me of anti-Semitism, to which I'm sensitive right now, especially. And he was trying to say, you can go against the grain and be religious. You can go against the grain and have values that are not popular. To say that in general, I agree 100%. To laud his wife, who chose to be a homemaker, more power to him and to her. But anything to me right now that smacks of anti-Semitism, to imply that the Jews killed Jesus, that's a line I'm not comfortable with people crossing. So, okay, I think he had some important messages, and that is, look, he's talking in a Benedictine college, and what that is a very religious place. And he is very religious, and what he said was appropriate for that place and for the set of beliefs that that group has. So to criticize someone who's saying exactly what people want to hear and believe, and that would open up the floodgates to criticizing anybody for anything. And certainly in our political discourse right now, it would limit anything going on. So I laud and applaud most of what he said, except for the part that I felt was coming very close to anti-Semitism. And, again, I wouldn't say he couldn't say it. I'm just very uncomfortable with it and feel that we need to call it out for what it is. And it was interesting to me, Barry, that you mentioned several things that were called out, LGBT stuff, and that hadn't been apparently. And so I'm wondering where the priorities are. And I think that might reflect the fact that the protests, the anti-Semitic protests that are happening on college campuses around our country are politically correct. And now, for some reason, the underdog of Israel is politically incorrect. And when hostages are released and when Palestinians are not being harmed by Hamas, then maybe there will be a chance for peace. And I do hope it occurs soon. So I'm sorry if I'm controversial.
As we say in the real world, amen, amen, and thank you. I want to unpack a few things that you mentioned, Diane, because they are truly need to be remarked upon. And the most important, I believe, is that Mr. Butker was invited to speak because he is known to be devout. And he was delivering, in my humble opinion, a great message to the people who he was speaking with. Because these are young men and women graduating college in, for want of a better term, I'll say it, a confused time in the American history. And one doesn't know what's going to happen. If you are armed with faith and with trust in God, I believe you have a much better chance of succeeding in this world in every aspect, happier, healthier, wealthier. And without that, you don't have it. Now, I'm going to mention now, thank you. I'm going to mention now something that I meant to send it to each of you, and I wrote it in my little newsletter 2 weeks ago. Again, you're girls, women, so you know this, but you don't know it. So everybody knows who Vince Lombardi was, right? Because we all know, most people know Vince Lombardi because of the Lombardi Trophy. That's what everybody plays for, right? You get, when you win the Super Bowl, you get the trophy. It's called now it's just called the Lombardi. And it's really interesting because Vince Lombardi was the winningest coach in football history thus far still. In a small town in Wisconsin called Green Bay. Green Bay, Wisconsin is a tiny town, and it dominated football in the early parts of the latter part of the 20th century, in the 1960s, 70s, going into the 80s. And Vince Lombardi was one of my heroes when I was growing up, not because he was a great player. He was a mediocre player. He was an amazing coach. And he's known for, interesting. I think we have some comments already. Oh, this is good. Uh-huh. Okay, we got stuff coming in. Interesting. Vince Lombardi's most famous quote, at least the one I found that helped me as a young man, was a story that one of his players came over to him and said, "Coach, I am so dedicated. This is what I want. This is my life. Green Bay Packers." Great, and it was a great player also. This is it. This is me. I am the Green Bay Packers. So Coach Lombardi, later that day in the locker room, gave a very short speech to everybody, and he told everybody, "I want everybody to understand that the priorities of this ball club are God, family, and the Green Bay Packers in that order. God's first.
Yes.
Family second. Green Bay Packers. And if you don't have that as your value system, to quote Diane Medved, you're screwed up." And that's part of what's happening in the discussion now after Harris and Butker. And I'm going to throw in a few little other pieces after we hear from wonderful Maura. So Maura, if you be so kind, because as I said, we asked everybody to either read the convention speech or watch the video, etc. Give us your thoughts. And again, Maura was raised Catholic, so you may have another kind of insight. Oh, but she's mute. She has taken a vow of silence for the moment.
Here, hard to believe I'd be mute. My husband would never believe that comment.
Okay.
Not possible. You know, I did exactly what Diane did. I did not read anything. I only watched him as if I were there in the audience. Ooh. And I loved being able to do that because then I could hear him clearly and uncensored speaking in that moment with his audience. Frankly, I will tell you, as someone who grew up Catholic but then moved out of the Catholic environment, or let's say institution, more into a greater Christianity of faith, it was eye-opening to me on a number of levels. Number one, I was not familiar with this young man, but I thought very handsome. He's very well put together. You could see he's very devout and unafraid to share with others his faith and his value system. And I would agree that as a young, handsome, married, successful man, he made an excellent speaker, commencement speaker for what I learned was an extremely conservative Benedictine college. My husband and I met at a Catholic college, but it was Jesuit, and it was anything but conservative. So this was a whole new experience for me. I have to say, on the one level, I was almost shocked to say, it's like somebody moved me back to my childhood in an era when traditional values were extolled, the virtues were lifted up, and everyone was given kind of like a different view of life and value systems that took in something other than, let's say, materialism or the typical things we see always promoted. I did enjoy it. And again, I took it in as if I were someone new. I loved when you originally asked us to look at this video or read the speech, that this was a man who was actually willing to give advice to recent college graduates that one of the finest things they could aspire to do is to get married and have children. It's like, that's so perfect for what we do. Nobody says that anymore. And that's why I liked it. Why is it that getting married, having children, staying in a marriage and growing together is not part of the public conversation? It's never viewed as a positive element in our society, and really on a declining basis, I'd say for the past 50 years, that's the environment we've been in. So I did like all of that. There were a few things in me that almost like pulled back. I know that he was speaking directly to the audience, and that was one reason why he was brought there, because he was very much of the same mindset as what the college was espousing. I think there were probably some comments that he could have just left out, but that's me. I am always looking to be the unifier and the uplifter rather than someone who points to everything that's wrong. I'll also tell you, Diane, that when he made that remark about who killed Jesus, I'm like, I don't come from a Jewish background, but my insides were like, ooh, I do know. In my eyes, I didn't think it was appropriate or necessary. But when I looked at it again, I have to say this. I listened a second time to him, and I think he was talking about somewhere in America, our voices and our independent opinions are now being shut down. And there may be many things I disagree with people on, many things, but I would allow them to speak. And he was, I gather, speaking about some legislation that they were looking at proffering in Congress. But you know what? It didn't, to me, like, what is that? What does that have to do with his overall message? If anything, I felt like it detracted from it, that it created a schism that didn't need to be there. And as someone who knows my history, I could very easily say all the Christian Protestants were getting bludgeoned by Catholics that felt you could only believe this way. So if you want to criticize one group, you better look in the mirror. But I will tell you, I felt that way, and I felt it detracted. It was unnecessary. But beyond that, I looked at this and I thought, wow, there's actually a group of young people at a college that does extol their Catholic faith and family that he mentioned had doubled in its enrollment. That was curious to me, that in the midst of our society moving away from faith, moving away from marriage, children, and a traditional lifestyle, that this was something that was actually not just a haven, but maybe a place of attraction to young people where they could find people of like value systems. So that part of it was good. What was the thing about the homemaker, if I could add this? I grew up, I would say, in the late 70s, but when I was in college and growing up right outside of New York City, the last thing The last thing I wanted to be was somebody's wife and a homemaker. To me, that was like worse than the kiss of death. And yet I have to, and so I'm listening to that thinking, well, that's very interesting. I hope he's not looking down at women who decide they want to do something else. Because in my lifetime, I ended up after a decade-long career where I was never at home and I was in management and I could have, been supporting a family all of my own. I ended up being a homeschooled mother, helping my husband at work. And I was the complete opposite. And I'll tell you, I made the most out of both. And I am so grateful I had the opportunity to be that stay-at-home mom. And I know that to this day, I just came back from visiting my daughter and son-in-law up in Maine. And I know that we have a relationship that I could have never gotten back. Had I not been there, I'm just grateful for it, but I would never push it on anyone else. And so I hope I said enough. I enjoyed hearing what I heard. I thought that he presents something of a very traditional, long forgotten approach to life that young people can consider as their future. But I probably would not be quite as definitive as in telling people everything has to be just as I said. But then again, he's talking just to one specific college. But it was refreshing. And the final thing I will say that is interesting about our culture is the backlash that comes out when people would dare suggest we live as people of faith and people of commitment to our spouses and children.
So, first of all, thank you so much, Maura. I want to make mention that I had a lot of interaction with Jesuits growing up. Because I grew up in a place called Brookline, Massachusetts, which is probably 60% Jewish. However, down the street from where we grew up was Boston College.
That's where we went to school, Boston College.
I know, that's why I'm mentioning it. Yeah. Hello, I listen. And I grew up, and when I was younger, I worked with a lot of kids who went to parochial school. So I learned about patent leather shoes, black patent leather shoes, and girls and looking, the nuns and things. Very involved with a lot of my friends. They couldn't believe it because I was the only Jewish kid in this particular group. They were all Catholic and Catholic at parochial schools. And in those days, still parochial school was the switch with the hand and the nuns and such. And great stuff. And so they couldn't believe that I would ask questions of rabbis and things. They said, we don't do that. So, and by the way, when you mentioned the word schism, it's so wonderful because that's so Catholic, schism, because that's unfortunately what happens when you go down the path. So I will just go throw in a couple little zingers here that I found truly amazing as a backlash against what Mr. Butker spoke about. And one was from the NFL itself, and the other is from the Benedictine nuns at his school. Because the school is divided into several parts, and there's still a monastery of Benedictine nuns. And the nuns, you can look this up, the nuns said, we don't agree with what he said. Just saying, look it up. I mean, my jaw was dropping. They just said, look, he speaks for himself. We don't agree. It's sort of almost like they're saying, we want to be liberated. Now, we're nuns, of course. We're wearing a habit. We took the vows. And yet, we don't agree with him. It was almost as if they something was off. But the NFL, I don't know if you know this, but the NFL has a chief diversity officer. But I don't know what a chief diversity officer does in the NFL. However, this chief diversity officer, who I believe is white, and so it's very funny. Should have been however, he said that that Mr. Butker, and of course this is a CYA situation, does not speak for the NFL, et cetera, et cetera. Now, there are a number of pieces that came out from his speech that were fascinating in the sense that, and he was alluding to this, and you remember, I even spoke about it, is that unfortunately in the NFL today, most of the people who play, let's be blunt, they're all men, and they're all very young men, and they're all very wealthy young men. And that is a very toxic, heady mixture. A lot of money, not a lot of good parenting at home, and wayward. They don't have the compass that he has. And therefore, the number of what we'll call illegitimate children that are fathered by people in the NBA is astonishing. It's not just, oh, one or two, it happens. It's astonishing. The numbers are in the hundreds. And there are some players that have more than 10 children. So I know the reason I'm mentioning is because we're talking about a unique being now, a man who very much values God, values family, values his role as a professional football player, again, in the Vince Lombardi tradition, in that order, and recognizes that that's a path of success. That's a path of eternity. That's a path of growth. Because this, remember, what's our podcast? Marriage with Joy. It's very hard to have a joyous marriage if you don't have a happy spouse, right? Either way, it doesn't lend itself to what we're talking about. So when you have in our country at the moment a trend amongst a lot of well-educated, I put that in air quotes, well-educated people who lack wisdom, maybe have education but lack wisdom, and are not getting married and are not having children. And you see the decline, first of all, of the rate of marriage, and secondly, a precipitous drop in the reproduction rate in America. We don't reproduce. You need 2.1 children per household to have a replenishment of a population. We've fallen below that. We're in, I think, 1.6, 1.7. It's almost in dangerous territory. When you get into 1.4, 1.3, you're in dangerous territory, which is where Japan is, by the way. Japan is at 1.2. They literally, if something doesn't change dramatically in Japan over the next 100 years, half of the population will be gone. I mean, this is just numbers, that's all. So there's a precipitous decline in our culture. And part of it has to do with what he was speaking about. The ability for a woman to recognize that a conscious choice can be, I can be happy, fulfilled, contributing in the role of what other people call stay-at-home mom. I said, okay, or a stay-at-home mother, a homeschool mother, a mother with children, responsibilities, taking care of a home and celebrating that. Imagine. So with that as our segue, wonderful Lori. Okay. So first of all, tell us, Lori, that you're okay. The doctor said you'll be fine.
I'm getting tests. I just had blood work done. We'll see.
Okay. Well, let's hope it's just
Weird
whatever it is.
stuff. I asked the lady, I'm like, what could this be? She goes, ever since COVID, people are showing up with the weirdest things and we have no idea what they are. So we're testing for everything. That's what she told me. And I'm like, huh. So we'll see what happens. Okay.
So did you hear? Yeah. So did you make the time to either listen to his convention speech or read it?
I didn't listen to it in its entirety, but I listened to like 20 different people showing clips of what they thought of it. And all of them, I wanted to like slash their throats. Just kidding. Here's how I feel about this. Here is this guy given a platform to speak his mind, and he did. And it's his opinion. And he was given that chance to do that. And I'm always like, bravo. And why can't we be an audience that listens to someone speak and go, I agree with that. Nah, I don't agree with that. That was a good point. I don't know how I feel about that. And then when it's all over, go, you want to get dinner? Should we get dinner? Okay. Because does it change the world? No, it doesn't do anything. All it does is give us someone else's opinion. And I like hearing people's opinions because it all goes into my head and I go, well, what do I think? What do I want to do? How do I make my life different? Like, I hope my kids go out and get married. Am I being a good example so that they choose to do that? I hope so. And I literally at family dinner will talk to them about what you do when you get married, what you do when you choose a partner. What are we looking for? How are we going to make that? What do you want? Everything comes down to what do you want? And no one's asking people that question, and no one's giving anyone the platform to say what they want. And then when they say what they want, people go, thank you. And that empowers people. And I think that's what's missing in this world, because we're not listening to our youth saying, well, what do you want? And they're getting so confused. I know my kids are. Well, that's a lie. My kids aren't, but their friends are. And the suicide rate is still climbing, and I've got disasters happening left and right. And we can't control that. Okay, so to talk about some things you talked about, that who killed Jesus? Who cares? He's not here. What are we doing about it today? We can't go back and punish people that may or may not have done it, because it's who we are today. How are we showing up for it? All the people that were part of Hitler, if they're still around, okay. But the people that were generations from that, why would we punish them? Leave them alone. And I'm the person that says, I live in Manhattan Beach, and we just gave a lot of money to a group of people based on something that happened prior to all of our lives, and they're just trying to make good at it now. It's like going back to the Indians. Let's make good on it now. It's like, well, where is it? How do we fix it today? And I think people miss that. And I wish the world would just go, what's the solution forward? Let's stop looking backwards. We know what happened. Let's take those tools and make something better today, right? But what I like, though, is I like when someone stands up and shares their opinion. And I like when people don't agree, because that's when change can happen. Because when you have two opposing people, instead of arguing it or saying no, it's like, well, yes. And what else? How can we make it better? I think that's really important. We were talking about, as far as the Catholic nuns go, I don't know what they said or didn't say, but it doesn't matter. I too would be a Catholic nun if I could. If my husband died or something would happen, I'd probably donate my life to just making the world better, because we need that. Our kids need us to be better people and show them what this world is looking like. And how are we going to transfer this torch to them? I don't want to be a kid today. If you said, go back, Lori, and do this all over again, I'd be like, no, I don't want to be in my kids' shoes. It's awful. I don't want to go through this. What are they going to be looking at in 40 years? I don't want that. So I'm glad it's not my problem, but I will teach people who are around me that to look at everything with new eyes and hear everyone out. Maybe there's another idea no one talked about, and those persons didn't think they had a voice to stand on.
This is especially important, what you're mentioning, because you are part of a fairly large, robust Catholic community, right? In your church, I think you told me plus minus 5,000 families? 7,000. Okay, I said plus.
Huge.
Yeah, that's a large Catholic community. Now, I didn't say just church, it's community. Now, you also said that you had difficulties in the community because of things that you personally went through, and you thought people would be around and they weren't. And I mean, just the idea of community became.
Yeah. Can I say one more thing?
No, that's it. You're off. Forget it. Yes.
This is what I was like. What if there's something else I wanted to say? So I had an experience where I went to church, and there were some people there I didn't like a while ago, and they were there. And I'm always like, be a better person, be a better person. But what happened a long time ago kept coming up, and it was bothering me. And I was like, ooh, I felt awful. So I ended up leaving, going home, going, I have to go back to church. So I went back to church, found a priest because it was confession night. And I sat down with him and I said, listen, I got some problems. And he heard my story. And it was this clique of women that decided to oust my child when he was in third grade. And they squeezed him out of a bunch of things. And with that was me. And I didn't know what was happening until it was too late. And years went by before someone said, we're really sorry about that. And I was like, what happened? And so when I see these girls, they're still the same way. My skin crawls. And I want to be a good person and let that go and be loving and honest and caring to them. But the humanity side of me goes, Urgh! And that's what I was trying to talk to this priest about. Like, what do I do? And he goes, Lori, you're a good person. You do a lot of good work. And I said, yes. And he goes, do you want to be like those cliquey women? Do you want to be a part of those cliquey women? Or do you want to stand alone like Jesus was? Jesus had a lot of friends, but they all left him at his time of need. Do you want to stand alone and do the right thing? Or do you want to be in a clique of people that may not be doing the right thing? And I was like,
Duh.
thank you. I felt so much better. But it was a really interesting moment. And it was really powerful because, of course, I want to stand alone. Do I want to have rocks thrown at me and be killed? I don't think so. But if it came down to it, it's like, I just want happiness and joy. And I want people to do the right thing. And sometimes we have to stand alone, like that man did, that player. He stood alone and now he's being tarnished. But I'm sure he's got some friends around him that said, you did a good thing. And I don't even care if some of the things that he did, I didn't agree with him. I care that he was brave enough to voice his opinion. And for that, I applaud him.
Maura, she's taking her vows of silence again.
A mute button. Okay. I took notes and left out the most important takeaway I had from that man.
Yes.
Tell me if you noticed it, if you watched. Diane watched the whole thing. I don't know if you watched as well. I was listening to a lot of what he was sharing in terms of, let's say, his philosophy and his belief system. The biggest takeaway from Harrison Butker's presentation was when he referred to his wife, started speaking about her on a personal sense of when he met her in middle school, and he started to cry. Now, guess what? That to me was life-changing. If you took nothing else from that guy, what you saw was the man's heart. He fell in love with a young girl, and I don't know what his age is right now, but these two are committed. They love each other. It is tangible. It's palpable. And he was breaking down as this big, famous football player because he was so touched by the love that he shares in that marriage relationship. And then remember he said too that she must have converted to his faith. They were one and they had grown together in one. So you could cut out every other thing he said. The most honest takeaway that could have hit anybody else in the audience was that this man is living a life of his dreams. And it's a dream that many of us don't even know can be part of the fabric of our lives. That was my biggest takeaway. Forget about my notes.
Let's use Diane.
Well, just to add, first of all, that was very, very good, Maura. Yes, that was a moment that everyone noticed, and it was pivotal. But we also didn't mention, while the coverage seemed to focus on what he said about the glory of being a homemaker, and he called it a homemaker. He didn't call it a housewife. He didn't call it a stay-at-home mom. It was a homemaker, which is a much better term and a much more complete term. But the other thing that we didn't comment on, that he spent as much time as he did about the feminine side, was the masculine side. He spent a long time saying, and men shouldn't shy away from being masculine. What does masculine mean? Well, he implied and didn't say different from feminism or from being feminine, a woman. And so I think that he was trying to cover all those bases, which you have to look at it as a complete picture. He felt a responsibility and obligation to be a man, as opposed to trying to make this amalgam of, all the roles are the same and everything's the same. He was making distinctions. If there's anything Judaism does, it's make distinctions between things. And he was making distinctions. That was his whole speech, all different kinds of distinctions. And they're all boiled down to what is right, what is wrong, what is right for me, and what is right for you. And he was giving people food for thought so that they could determine that. And if they get angry, fine, because this is the kind of thing we should be investing our emotions in discussing.
Good points.
This is so wondrous. I'm sure there are thousands of people listening to this, and they're applauding, they're crying, they're happy. because each point that's been brought up here is truly vital in our society today. It's he's speaking. I don't remember the number of people. It's only in the hundreds. And he's talking about what it means to be a man without having to say, this is what a man does. He's talking about being what a woman is. Well, saying, well, you're right. She stays at home and just is, barefoot, pregnant, and whatever. And the other thing, 3 things, I forget they are. The ability to raise up the human condition because we are created in God's image. This is part of what I took from the commencement. Since he's speaking about God and the glory of God, and he wasn't afraid to use that term. By definition, we as human beings, and a man and a woman, because that's how he created us, again, using his terms and the biblical idea, we have roles. And when we step into our roles as man, as woman, husband and wife, nurturers for children, and fulfilling them in the best way possible, then we're doing the best job possible. And for him to be given a stage, and let's be blunt, the people in the audience are listening because he's a star of the football club team that won the Super Bowl twice in a row in a great game in the last few seconds. And he's a hero. So you can focus on him, and he has your attention now, and then recognizing that what he's doing is in total humility as a great man, that it's all because of God's glory. You couldn't say that in any number of the famous schools. You couldn't do it. They would walk out. If they weren't walking out to protest against, in favor of evil in the world, they'd protest that and they'd boo because they can't hear. The ability for a great being to say, I'm nothing, in the sense that I'm a football player. I'm a devout Catholic. I'm a devoted husband. I have a wonderful wife. We have children. And so can you. This is what I loved most about what he said. For me, he was saying, and so can you. Each person here could do this. You don't have to be a star football player. Everybody has this God-given talent to create something beautiful, to build a home, a marriage with joy. That's what I heard. That's what I felt. And by the way, I personally loved the way he spoke because it was measured, it was soft, it was clear. He literally he thought about what he was saying. It wasn't just off the cuff. And it was said in what we call, when it comes from the heart, it goes to the heart, it connects. It was just so delightful. So that's why I'm so thankful that when I asked each of us to either read the speech or listen and such, and you did it, because it gave us a chance to each one of us to say over what we see as the highlights, and to give over to the many thousands of people around the world who may not have participated or may have seen a different kind of, heard, like you said, Diane, even better, that they were taking out of context and speaking about what they thought somebody else said about it. When you watch it and you feel it, it's a watershed. There's something that's happening right now in our country. We won't talk about the show trials. And I say the word show trials because unfortunately they tend to look like what could have happened in the Soviet Union. Whether you agree with that particular person or not, beside the point. There are things happening in our country that are roiling it and creating chaos. And here comes someone and says, we want harmony. You need to know, he said, I'm saying, you need to know that God is the pivotal part, to use your word, Diane, that pivotal piece of whatever we're working with. And when that is true, then all else can be true, right? Sweetheart, love, a man moved to tears. I mean, you can't make this up. This is what's a great movie. It's a Wonderful Life. You know, it's that in 2024. It's a wonderful thing that happened in our country, when all around, I mean, on campuses all over the country are being overturned and created chaos and hatred, and comes along a message of love and hope. I was very touched by it. And I think each of us are as well. And I want to say, again, I do with every show, I think. I hope I do. I'm sorry if I don't. How much I appreciate each one of you. Diane, Laura, Lori, for giving you your time, your energy, your thoughts. They're so important. There are people all over the world who just love listening to this show because it's an uplift. We really do great stuff, kids. So as we say, we like to finish our show with a fond thank you to Dr. Diane Meved and Maura Sweeney and Lori McDermott, your humble host, Barry Shore. And we're going to give a blessing to everybody, and then we do a hug. Actually, we'll do a hug first. So we know that HUG stands for heartfelt, unlimited giving. So on the count of three, if we may, everybody, 1, 2, 3. And our blessing from each one of us to all of you. Go forth, live exuberantly, spread the seeds of joy, happiness, peace, and love. Go mad. Go make a difference. Welcome to Marriage with Joy, which is the most open discussion on the internet about the positive, purposeful, powerful, pleasant aspects of living in harmony with matrimony. Marriage with Joy unabashedly discusses the most interesting questions raised by listeners. Our informed and informative panel addresses issues with thought, wit, and aplomb. Voted best of the web 2 years running.